Hello everyone, this is General Hand Grenade. Welcome to my war room in Prince George, British Columbia. Well, I was going to take the Global 40 map off the table here because I'm done with it, but I thought I'd make one more video before I take it off and put it back in the closet. I was watching a video, I think yesterday, maybe it was the day before. It was by a new YouTuber by the name of Admiral Seabass. You might want to check his channel out. He's pretty well spoken and everything. Right now what he's doing is he's trying to meld Global 40 with Global War 36, something that I've tried to do in the past as well. He's trying to use the tech chart for Global 40 and some of the units as well. Anyway, one of the things I was watching, he was doing the UK turn the other day, and he was doing the Taranto raid. And in the first round, he took a hit on the British carrier, one hit on the British carrier, and that was it. And one of the comments I made to him, and well, the reason why was because he lost that battle, the British lost that battle. If you're going to take one hit on your carrier, you might as well take two, because there's going to be no place to land your fighters if they had to. In his case, his fighters didn't, or his planes didn't need to land because he didn't bring one from the UK, a fighter. So he didn't need to land it there, although that's something that you do need to consider. But the other consideration was that carrier is going to be sitting in the Mediterranean after that without any planes on it, and probably not any boats either, because all they had left, or all they had was the carrier, the cruiser, and I think a destroyer at that time. And he was obviously going to lose some because there was a full scramble in there. 2 Italian fighters and 1 German fighter. Anyway, there's no point in, if you're going to not take a hit on the carrier, and it's an attacking unit, so it's got no dice. Attacking carrier has 0 attack value. So if you're going to not take a hit on it, that means you're going to land planes on it. That's your intention. So you have to count everything up ahead of time and say, okay, do I think I'm going to have planes left? Because a carrier in the Mediterranean with a couple of planes on it, especially a couple of fighters, is actually pretty valuable. It's not that it can't be taken out. I mean, it should be taken out either by the Italians or by the Germans, but a fully loaded carrier is going to have 1 roll at 2, and plus if you have 2 fighters, then 2 dice at 4, right? And plus you can take 2 hits on the carrier, so you may be able to take 2 or 3 planes, or even boats, like high value units. You might be able to take that off of either the Germans or the Italians. So there's something to be said for having a fully loaded carrier left. But there's nothing to be said for having an unloaded carrier left over. So anyway, it got me to thinking about how we choose casualties and things like that. I've been doing this for years, right? Like, I've been playing the game since the mid 80s and stuff, and it's gotten more complicated since then, but I've still played a lot of Global 40. So I thought I'd make this video for some of the newer players who, you know, like, you're just learning the game, and it all looks really cool, all these neat units and everything, but you don't really know what to lose. And sometimes what looks obvious, something, you know, like you take the one that is worth the least, might be the best thing to do, and that's not always the case, because of the relationship between the units. And that's especially true in naval battles. In land battles, it's not as much of a difference, but when you're talking about having subs and destroyers and planes that can't land on carriers and capital ships with 2 hits each, and where you are on the board, what it takes to repair a capital ship, like, that's a lot more complicated than the land, where, you know, you're probably just going to choose the unit with the lowest value, right? Or the lowest defending value, depending on how much you have left. Like, there's a bit of an art to the land as well, but not nearly as much as there is to the naval battles. Anyway, so I thought I would set up a pretty complicated one here, because then I can talk about all of it, right? Not just a smaller thing like the Taranto raid. But I mean, you'll see elements of everything in a scenario such as this one. So let's take a look at what we have here. What I was going to do is put a battle board down and then I could throw all the units on, but I thought it might be a little easier, or better anyway, to show it this way, where I put the dice out, and I've separated the units to unit types. So here's what we have here. This Japanese force is going to attempt to go down to Hawaii and actually do an amphibious assault as well. Like, they're not just going after the American boats. They've got 4 transports here. They got 4 dudes, 2 artillery, and 2 tanks. And so these are the dice that they have up here. There's 2 at 1, there's 4 at 2, and 2 at 3. That would be the tanks, right? And then for the boats here, this is what the boats have. So there's 5 submarines at 2, and then there's 3 destroyers at 2, and then you're going to have 3 fighters at 3 and 3 carriers at 3. And I didn't separate those because there's no difference in the rolling, whereas there would be a difference in the rolling between the submarines and the destroyers. Submarines could have first strike, and also they could not shoot planes. So that's why I've separated those. And then you have at 4 here, you've got 3 tactical bombers and 2 battleships. So that's what they have there. A total of 19 dice on the boats. And then you've got your 8 land units. So there's lots that you have to consider when you're going in there, okay? That's what you have. So what do the Americans have? Okay, so can I take the land? First of all, let's look at, can we take the boats out? Well, actually, I'd probably look at if I could take the land first. So on the land, there's an anti-aircraft gun, which is not going to be a problem because these boats up here, or all of this stuff up here, is coming from Sea Zone 6. Okay, I forgot to mention that. So the planes could not reach the island of Hawaii anyway. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 onto Hawaii, and then they don't have that extra move to land back on the carriers. So that's not a consideration. So the Japanese can ignore the anti-aircraft gun. That's why I didn't put a dice out here for it, or a die, I guess. But we have to be mindful of the fact that it still can be taken as a casualty. So the Americans do have 4 ground units, but only 3 of them are going to fire. So 2 of them will be at 2, and the tank will be at 3. So, and then there's 3 fighters on the land, and I've got them over here, 3 at 4, because you also, you could be the defender in this scenario. So you're going to have to decide, with this air base here, will the fighters scramble or will they defend the land? And so the considerations that you would have here, I didn't put, I can't seem to find my capital city marker, but Honolulu is not capital city marker, sorry, a victory city marker. Honolulu is a victory city. So if Japan was going for their 6th victory city, if this was the last one that they needed, then I might not scramble the fighters, because I think that that if you put these 3 fighters over here on the land, and then you have 4 units to soak up hits, then I don't think that the Japanese could take that with what they have, right? But if that's not the case, if they're not going to be able to take that over, or if I think that the Americans can take it back, and we're going to get into that in a minute, then I might put the fighters over here, and so that would mean scrambling them into the sea zone, and then this is what would be defending against the Japanese boats. The Americans would have, what do we got here? So there's 4 submarines, 2 destroyers, and a carrier. And then at 3 here they have the cruiser and the tactical bomber. And then at 4 there's the 3 scrambling fighters, but they also have a battleship and a fighter that's on the carrier, right? So if you take these 3 off, then that's going to be a pretty easy battle for the Japanese ships. They've got 19 dice, right, in the first round, and this would be what, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is only 11 dice, and you look at those dice. Those dice are much like that's 5 at 4 and 6 at 3. You know what I mean? Whereas down here, there's only 2 at 4 and 2 at 3. You know, so that's going to be an easy battle. If you put these ones in there, then Japan still has the advantage, but it's a much closer fight, and the Americans can take off on a lot of Japanese boats, right? And so how do you decide with that? Okay, well, what's going to happen after this turn? You know what I mean? Like, let's say you don't scramble the fighters, you put them in here, you try to take off as many Japanese boats as you can, and then what's going to happen on the American turn when that comes around? Well, you have to look around. Does the Americans have any other boats? What can they counterattack with, right? And also, what do they have in the land? So then you look up here, and this is what the Americans have to come back at them with if the Japanese are successful. Let me just try to find a good camera angle here. So on the land, they have, they're going to have 2 dudes, an artillery, and a tank. So that's 1 at 1, 2 at 2, and 1 at 3. So, so now when you look at the land, if you were to not scramble, the Americans had 4 land units down here, and the Japanese had 8 land units. And remember that they definitely not going to get any bombardment shots because they're going to have a naval battle. So you know that none of the American ground units are going to get taken out by the bombardment shots. They're not going to get any. So I would think that the Japanese are going to be down to 4 or 5 land units if they do get to attack the land, like if the transports get through. So the question is, can that take that out? Well, remember there's an air base here as well, and you've got bombers, you've got a fighter, you've got a tactical bomber, and these are the boats that you have over here. So not as big a force. So you kind of have to calculate for yourself. You have to give it some thought. What do you think the Japanese are going to have left? You know what I mean? Like, and that's when you're deciding whether to scramble or not. But when you're looking at this, let's say, like I said, you had to try to take back the land because that was the last victory city. These guys are not going to be able to take back the land, or might not have as good a chance of taking back the land if those fighters scramble, I think, because the fighters scrambling would mean that these guys would have the advantage on the land, right? Anyway, like there's battle calculators that you can use for all of this, but I am not a fan of those battle calculators. To me, this is what the game is all about. And like, I see these dice in my head, right? I don't necessarily see those colors, but I look at the units and I see all these dice. I see those dice. I see all these dice in my head, and you've got to weigh all of these options, and that's the game, right? It's your intelligence against somebody else's intelligence. It's human against human. Your ability to calculate odds and hope those odds work in your favor. You've got to have some luck, of course. Like this Navy here, without scrambling the fighters, could theoretically dice this Navy, you know what I mean? And that Navy sinks and it's all over, and you didn't even have to scramble. Like, anything can happen, right? But you have to decide based on what you're looking at and what you're calculating in your mind, you think is going to happen. And that's just to begin with, okay? That's before the fight begins. Let's just say, okay, let's just say we're going to take a chance here. Let's say what we want to do, we want to turn the tide of this war around in the Pacific. So not only do we want them not to be able to take over this land, because remember, even if you put enough stuff on the land here, if you don't scramble these fighters, they're going to have a fairly large Japanese Navy left, and they may have more stuff up here. You know what I mean? If they've already got 5 victory cities, then they probably got quite a bit of money. And the Americans don't have much back there. They've got some, but they don't have much, right? So you're thinking to yourself, I've got to turn this around. I've got to defeat this Navy. So what I want to do, I'm going to scramble these 3 fighters. You might be taking a bit of a chance, but not really. I mean, the odds aren't overwhelming. Like, now I'm thinking that the Japanese are not going to have 1,000,000 boats left, right? When I say 1,000,000, I mean a lot, right? And I do have some left. Plus, I have those bombers up there. You know what I mean? So we'll just move along here and see how it goes. Let me sit down. I don't want to roll all this out though. I just want to, let's just do this theoretically, okay? So some of the things that we need to look at first is, like, submarines have first strike capability, right? If there's no destroyers. But both sides have subs and both sides have destroyers. So, okay, that's something we've resolved in our mind already. So we don't need to consider that anymore. We've already considered the scramble, and the scramble is done. We've looked at the subs versus destroyers ratio, and that's a saw-off, so we don't need to worry about that. The transports are not part of the battle, and the ground units, as well as the ground units on the land. So we're just worried about the boats and the fighters right now. So then, let's say, what do these guys have? 19 dice. Let's say that they get, let's give them 11 hits, okay? So now we decide how to take these hits off. For me, the first thing that I would do is tip this battleship over on its side. So that's 1 hit. And it's no problem for the Americans to damage their carrier because the planes can land on the land. You can't land on a damaged carrier, so the planes in this battle would only be able to go one space. If you were taking damage on one of the carriers here, the Japanese carriers, then those planes would not have a place to land. So you need to be mindful of that when you're damaging your carriers. But you know what? I think that because the carrier only defends at 2, I'm going to take 2 hits on that. Because I think that I'm going to lose this battle, but I want to take off as many casualties as I can. So I'm just going to take this right off and damage the battleship. I'm going to try to keep as many of the big units as possible. I'm going to, what did we say, 11? Let's just say 10 hits, okay? So that's 3 hits. Let's take off one of these, 4 hits, 5, 6, 7 hits. Then we look, okay? To me, those ones are easy. Now we have to start looking at things. If I was the attacker, I would think that the sub would be more important. I don't want to get rid of my last destroyer because then he could be using subs against me here. So I would take this guy off, I think. So that's 8 hits. And let's take the cruiser off. That's 9 because he's at 3. And let's take the tactical bomber. He's at 3. So that's 10. So we've lost all the things that we need. But let's say that these guys did pretty well. And they got 9 hits. So then when the attacker's deciding what they need to take off, you don't want it to just take 1 hit on your carriers. Because, like I said, there's no place for those planes to land if that's going to be the case. If you're going to take a hit on your carrier, you might as well take 2 hits on it and take 2 of your planes off. That's what I think anyway. So, and then you've got your subs here. There's all these subs. Subs are only good against boats. The Americans only have 2 boats left, right? So why keep any of the subs? So let's take all 5 subs out and let's damage both battleships. So that's 5, 6, 7. So we need 2 more hits. We've got lots of destroyers, and these things are actually worth a lot of money. So let's just take 2 destroyers off. So there we go. That's the first round of combat. So then we have to decide, should we keep going? Now, if you're the attacker, you want to consider, geez, I lost a lot there. You know what I mean? Like there's you have to count up what you have left and everything, because you have to wonder about that Navy over there, right? It's pretty obvious that you could take these guys out probably. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left, and you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 dice. So you're still looking good to take out this C zone here, but then what about those guys? And then the other things to consider are things that we can't see in this scenario, like what's happening in the rest of the game. What does Japan have on Japan? You know what I mean? How many other boats do they have? Is this all the boats that they have on the board? Things like that, right? What does the Americans have for an Atlantic fleet? Like the Atlantic fleet might be on its way over here, right? So you keep going. I think that we're going to keep going. So these guys, they're going to get, what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, let's just, that's pretty easy to get 6 hits with what those guys got. So these guys wipe all these guys out. Now 6 hits for these guys. Now when I'm taking off these hits, I'm going to be worried about what they have up here. Like up there, there's 2 submarines, right? I'm definitely going to want to keep a destroyer, because those submarines are going to hit me and I'm not even going to get a shot at them, right? What else? That's really the only thing that I need to worry about is those subs up there. I mean, everybody's going to take a shot at me. The only thing that I'm thinking about is considerations and what to keep. So we're going to keep the sub. But one of the things I might do is get rid of one of these, because that's 2 hits, 3, 4 hits, and we're going to take 5 hits. So we'll take a cruiser off. Okay, so that's what the Americans have left for a Navy now, or the Japanese, sorry. The transport gets taken out, and then the amphibious assault happens. Let's take these 4 off, and let's say the Americans did pretty darn good. And so all that's left is 2 tanks and an artillery. There, that's what's left. Now it's the Japanese that own this. We'll put this down in here. Get rid of all this stuff. So now that we have to recalculate everything all over again when the American turn comes along. You know, what does the Americans want to do? Do they want to attack that? Like, if that's not the 6th victory city that's been taken out, then they don't have to attack that, right? They can choose to defend over here instead. And like, if that wasn't the 6th victory city, that might be the best course of action for them, because these guys are still pretty powerful, aren't they? They've still got 1, 2, 3, 4 at 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 at 3, 1, 2, 3 at 2. So that's pretty formidable. Here, let's just set that up. So they got 3 at 2, and 4 and 3. So they still got, like this, there's only 9 dice here. There's 10 dice here, right? The Japanese are still, oh, I forgot about these 2 things. Oh, no, I didn't. I put the dice in for the bombers, that's right. So the Japanese are still more powerful, right? Now, the Americans could decide to go after them. It just depends. Like, you might have to go after them. You might not have a choice. If that's the 6th victory city, then you have to take it out, or it's going to last for another round. And once it lasts for another round, then the game is over. The Axis win. Because unless Anzac's sitting over here with a huge navy, which, you know, a navy that could take that out, I don't see it, right? Unless that's the case, I don't think that, unless that's the case, then the Americans are going to have to go after them. There we go. But you also have to consider the land, right? So the Americans have 4 dice on the land, and the Japanese are only going to have 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So like a bomber could come out here and attack the land and then land on Midway, right? That's possible. So that's how you would have to decide whether or not to take all of your units against the Navy, or if you want to hold back a bomber and say that's going to be in with the amphibious assault. 1, 2, 3. The other thing you could do is these planes will also reach Hawaii, but I think that you're probably going to need everybody there to go against the Japanese Navy, right? I think it's going to take everybody to do that. And again, depending on what you have, how much you were able to purchase, are you going to be able to defend this if you take everybody down there and fail, right? You know, like are you going to be able to defend the land here? Because that certainly would be your 6th victory city. So what did you buy? You know, what did you buy in order to put on over here in case you fail to take Hawaii? And is failure an option, right? We've already discussed that. But the considerations that you need are in the water are much more than just taking off the lowest priced unit, as you've seen. Like you do want that destroyer if you have subs. And like here, let me just show you another case over here. Like if all these guys had was this, you know what would be the best thing to take against them? Is just a bunch of subs. Let me just grab a bunch of subs here. Here, let's give these guys one of these too. So you think, you know, this is pretty powerful what these guys have. It's much more powerful and much more expensive than these subs. But if these subs attack that, the subs are much more powerful, because the only things that get to shoot at the subs are this, this, and this. The planes, none of the planes are going to get to shoot at the sub. If the subs take out, even damage the carriers, there's no place for these guys to land. You know what I mean? There's no Japanese island here. So these subs would be far better off going out. Like, you'd be better off taking that in there than you would be taking this in there. Like, you wouldn't need to take your carrier and your battleship in against these guys, because then those planes are going to be, the only thing they can shoot are these. You can't take hits with your subs from the planes. So these you don't want to take in there. You just want to take the subs against carriers. If there's just one loaded carrier and one sub, that's still a pretty good attack for that sub, because you got 2 on 2, right? And if you manage to take the carrier, then that dies, right? So this is a really good, even though it's even odds, that's a really good chance to take one sub on one carrier, especially if you're where these planes can't land. One sub on one carrier is absolutely beautiful. If you ever see that, then absolutely go after it. A little bit of a different story if there's a Japanese island there, right? Because these planes can land on the island, right? So it's not as much of a bonus if you get that. But anyway, I don't think I need to resolve this. I just wanted to show you the types of considerations that you need to have when you're taking casualties. I wouldn't have wanted, like showing you this, I would not have wanted to take everything off but the carriers, you know, like take all the little units off and damage the battleships like that, if the Americans had all these subs back here, like this. Like if this is what it looked like, then that would have been a bad way to leave it like this, right? Because there's not many boats here, and there's a ton of subs over here. So you have to look at what's going on. Not only what's going on while I'm going to attack these guys, but what can they hit me back with on their turn? And what are my goals, right? Are my goals to go after that victory city or that land or whatever? Like, is it worth going after that navy over there, right? Was it worth the Japanese attacking Pearl Harbor, considering what happened after that? You know what I mean? Like, here, let me just remind you what happened after that. Okay, so what happened was Japan came in with all of these planes, right? They didn't use anything but planes. They just flew all of these planes in there. And they were very, very successful. They took out a lot of battleships. They took out a lot of boats. I think they took out something like 17 boats or something like that. that day. Hugely successful until it came time to pay the piper. Was that worth it? I don't know. Anyway, you have to consider everything, right? You have to consider what you have, what they have, and then what's going to happen after that. Anyway, I just wanted to get this video in before I take this off my table. And then I'm going to Tulsa in a week, and when I come back, I'm going to be bringing the new map home with me. And I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to show that or anything. I think I probably can, but I'll talk to them when I'm down there. I'll talk to them and see if I'm allowed to make videos about the new rules and stuff like that. That's something that I'd really like to do. I can't see why they wouldn't want to do that, but we'll see. Maybe there is a reason why that I'm not thinking of. But that's the reason why I want to take this one off the table, is because I got to start getting ready to go, and when I come back, my focus is going to be definitely somewhere else, and you might not see this map on my table for a while. Anyway, take care, everyone. General Hand Grenade out.